My name is Thea. I'm 34 years old, and last Thanksgiving my father raised a crystal glass in front of 14 family members, smiled like a proud king surveying his kingdom, and publicly declared that I was the only person at the table who still hadn't figured out how to become an adult. Everyone laughed, the kind of nervous laugh people use when they know something cruel has just been said, but don't want to be the one to name it. I remember the candlelight reflecting in the glasses. I remember the smell of turkey and sage and butter. I remember my sister lowering her eyes to her plate, pretending embarrassment while enjoying every second of it. And I remember the exact moment I stopped being afraid. I didn't cry. I didn't defend myself. I didn't storm out. I picked up my fork, took one slow bite of dry turkey, dabbed the corner of my mouth with my napkin, turned to my brother-in-law, and asked one calm question. His fork hit the china so hard the gravy boat jumped. Then the whole room went silent. 6 seconds. 6 long, beautiful seconds. The kind of silence that only happens when truth has just entered a room full of lies. What no one knew, not my father, not my sister, not the relatives who spent years watching me be mocked for sport, was that I had been carrying a folded public record in my purse for 3 weeks. A legal filing. A simple piece of paper. The kind anyone could find if they knew where to look. And I knew exactly where to look. Before I tell you how a Thanksgiving dinner became the day my family mythology collapsed, take a second to like and subscribe. And if you'd like, leave your city and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where people are listening from. Now, let me take you back to October. 3 weeks before the turkey got cold. I lived in apartment 2B on Birch Street. 2nd floor. West-facing kitchen window. Old carpet. Thin walls. Slow hot water. But every day around 4:30 in the afternoon, sunlight came through the kitchen window and turned the worn linoleum floor into something almost magical. Cheap flooring became gold. Dust looked elegant. Even the chipped counter edges softened in that light. My orange cat, Copper, adored that hour. He'd leap onto the windowsill and sit there like a tiny king watching the parking lot below. Tail wrapped around his paws. Eyes alert. As if the passing mail truck and the neighbor carrying groceries were scenes in a nature documentary. I'd pour my second coffee and stand beside him. That was peace. Not glamorous peace. Not mansion peace. Not social media peace. Real peace. The kind you build quietly for yourself. I worked at Ridgeline Title Services off Route 9, squeezed between a dental office and a discount tire shop. Most people don't think about title companies unless something goes wrong. My job was reviewing public records before real estate closings. Deeds. Liens. Easements. Judgments. Old mortgages that should have been discharged but weren't. Hidden claims that could wreck a purchase years later. I read paperwork so families could move into homes without inheriting someone else's problems. It wasn't flashy work. Nobody at parties said, "Wow, tell me more about the title examination." But it mattered. And I was excellent at it. I noticed patterns. I caught inconsistencies. I saw what other people missed because they were looking for headlines, while I was trained to notice footnotes. That skill would eventually ruin Thanksgiving. My boyfriend Nolan was building me a bookshelf that month. Not assembling one. Building one. There's a difference. He was a carpenter in the old-fashioned sense. Measured carefully. Sanded edges by hand. Understood wood grain the way some people understand music. He'd found reclaimed oak from an old barn demolition 2 counties over. It already lived one life, he said. Might as well give it another. That sounded like Nolan. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it usually stayed with you. He'd show up after work with sawdust on his jeans, kiss my forehead, and quietly make things stronger. Shelves. Loose cabinet doors. My confidence. He never tried to impress anyone. He just built things that held. My bills were paid. My credit score was excellent. I had savings. A retirement account. A stable job. A man who loved me. A cat who ran to the door when I came home. By almost any reasonable standard, I was doing well. But my father, Gerald, did not believe in reasonable standards. He believed in ownership. To Gerald, adulthood was not kindness, responsibility, emotional maturity, or integrity. It was square footage. A deed. A lawn. If your name was on property records, you mattered. If it wasn't, you were still a child. He never said it exactly like that. He didn't need to. It came through in every joke, every toast, every glance. Especially toward me. My older sister, Marlene, lived on Orchard Lane in a white colonial with black shutters and a red front door. 4 bedrooms. 2-car garage. A porch swing no one used. Window boxes changed seasonally. The kind of house that says, we are doing well, whether anyone inside is happy or not. She was married to Craig, who sold building materials and had excellent teeth, polished manners, and the unsettling ability to sound sincere while saying almost nothing. They had 2 children, Emma and Jake. They hosted brunches with cloth napkins. My father adored them. Because they looked right. That mattered more to him than truth ever did. At my 30th birthday dinner, Gerald stood up in a restaurant and said, maybe by 35, Thea will finally have a front door that belongs to her. He smiled after saying it, as if cruelty becomes harmless when paired with a grin. No one laughed. No one challenged him either. That was family tradition. My humiliation was background music. When I signed the lease for Birch Street, I invited him over for a small housewarming. He declined. That's not a housewarming, he said. That's rent celebration. Then he chuckled at his own joke. I hung up before he finished laughing. The year before everything exploded, our grandmother Ruth had a family trust set aside for both grandchildren. Marlene and I. Equal shares. Ruth believed fairness should be written down because memory becomes convenient in families. Gerald was the trustee, which meant he controlled distribution. One spring afternoon, he called casually and told me he had withdrawn $80,000 and given it to Marlene. She paid off her mortgage, he said proudly. She earned a little help. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone while copper rubbed against my ankles. The sunlight made a square on the floor. Everything looked warm. Nothing felt warm. What about my share? I asked. You don't need it, he said. You're still figuring things out. Then he hung up. Still figuring things out. I paid my own bills. Handled my own life. Never asked him for money. But because I rented, I was unfinished. Because Marlene owned, she was superior. That was the family math. Sunday brunches at Marlene's were performances. Fresh juice. Perfectly browned pastries. Children using indoor voices. Craig refilled Gerald's wine before he asked. Gerald was leaning back in satisfaction like a man admiring his own legacy. This, he'd say, gesturing around the table, is what a family should look like. Then glanced vaguely toward me. I noticed things others missed. Craig's smile tightened when finances came up. Marlene mentions home upgrades too often. The way people repeat success when they're afraid it might not be true. One Sunday, I saw a mortgage company envelope on the counter. Marlene noticed me noticing it and flipped it face down mid-sentence. I stored that moment quietly. The way I stored everything. At work in early October, I was reviewing routine county filings. Line after line. Assignment of mortgage. Release. Deed transfer. Then one entry stopped me cold. Holt, Craig A., and Holt, Marlene E. Deed of trust. Cash out refinance. $340,000. Recorded August 14th. I read it twice. Then 3 times. My fluorescent office light hummed overhead. 3 months earlier, Marlene had celebrated paying off her mortgage. My father had given her $80,000 from a trust meant for both of us. And now she had refinanced the house for more than the likely original balance. That meant one thing. The $80,000 had never gone to the mortgage. I waited until lunch. Then I accessed the public record system. Everything was there. Borrowers, Craig and Marlene Holt. Lender, Pacific Ridge Mortgage. Loan type, cash out refinance. Amount, $340,000. Not rate and term. Cash out. This means borrowing against home equity to extract money. People do that when they need cash badly. Repairs. Medical debt. Failing business. Panic. I sat in my car staring at the screen. The math arranged itself. My father gave her $80,000 because she claimed she'd paid off the mortgage. But if the mortgage had truly been gone, there would be nothing to refinance. She lied. She took the money. Then, they borrowed more. And I had spent a year being treated like the irresponsible daughter. That night, I barely slept. Copper slept beautifully. Some creatures are blessed with proportion. I dug further. Craig's side business had dissolved months earlier. Public filing. Losses likely. Debt likely. Desperation certain. I printed the refinance record. 16 pages. Folded them neatly. Placed them in a plain white envelope. No label. Then put it in my purse. I didn't know yet whether I would use it, but I knew I wanted the truth within reach. The next Saturday, I visited Ruth. She was 78, sharp-eyed, and lived in a small house with a tiny kitchen organized more efficiently than most mansions. She made tea properly. Loose leaves. Warm pot. Patience. I asked if she knew Gerald was revising his will. She snorted softly. Your father has been making dramatic announcements since puberty. Then she told me something I never forgot. Your grandfather once tried to leave nearly everything to Gerald because he was the practical child. I fought him. Families love rewarding the loudest person. She looked directly at me. Quiet people often carry everyone else. I nearly cried. Instead, I sipped tea. I asked about the trust. She said clearly, 60,000 each. I went still. He withdrew 80, I said. Her face changed. Not loudly. Dangerously. He what? I told her. Not about the refinance yet. Just the amount. She set down her teacup with surgical precision. I'll be at Thanksgiving. Gerald called the next week. He announced Thanksgiving would be at Marlene's and he'd be making an important statement about the future. I knew exactly what that meant. He planned to reward her publicly again. Probably the house. Maybe more trust assets. A coronation disguised as dinner. Then he said, try to behave this year. That sentence made my decision easier. Marlene called 10 days before Thanksgiving. I'm doing turkey, sides, and pies. You can bring a salad. Of course. I was assigned leave. Then she added, Dad's announcement is going to be really meaningful. Meaningful. People love vague words when specifics are ugly. I asked if Ruth had been consulted about the trust. Brief silence. That's between Dad and his lawyer. Translation, no. Then she said, please don't make anything awkward. What she meant was, know your place. Be quiet. Bring greens. The night before Thanksgiving, I sat in Nolan's truck while rain tapped the windshield. I'm not looking for a fight, I said. He nodded. But if he humiliates you again, he asked. I looked out at the wet parking lot lights. Then I'm done swallowing it. He squeezed my hand once. Good. Thanksgiving morning, I woke before dawn. Made black coffee. Read the refinance filing again. Facts are strangely comforting. They don't change based on mood. I almost left the envelope at home. Then Gerald sent a photo to the family group chat. Marlene's table is fully set. Caption. Proud of my girl. Singular. One daughter. I put the envelope in my purse. Picked up the salad. Walked out. Nolan drove. Cornfields blurred past under a gray sky. He said quietly, my dad ignored me. Your notices you too much in the wrong way. I laughed to spite myself. When we arrived, Ruth's Buick was already parked outside. Good. Marlene opened the door, wearing pearls and an apron. Curated domesticity. The house smelled like sage, butter, and vanilla candles. The table was set for 14. Gold-rimmed china. Crystal glasses. Mini pumpkins. Everything is expensive except honesty. Gerald hugged me quickly. Then hugged Marlene as she'd returned from war. Craig shook Nolan's hand. Palm damp. I noticed Nolan noticing. Ruth sat in a wingback chair watching everything with calm, predatory patience. We ate it too. Gerald had arranged seating. Naturally. He sat at the head. Marlene beside him. I was placed midway down the table, where he could monitor me without needing to acknowledge me. For 20 minutes, it felt almost normal. Children bickered. People passed potatoes. Candles flickered. Then Gerald stood and tapped his glass. The room quieted in waves. I've spent my life building things, he began. Homes, mostly. But my proudest creation is this family. He looked around theatrically. And no one has made me prouder than Marlene. She pressed a hand to her chest. Perfect timing. She paid off her house before 40. Built a family. Built a life. Then he turned his eyes to me. And unlike some people at this table, she learned how to be an adult. 14 heads turned. Toward me. Again. The old script. The designated loser. I smiled. Picked up my fork. Took one bite of turkey. Set it down. Turned to Craig. Craig, I said pleasantly, would you pass the turkey? And while you're at it, how's the $340,000 refinance going? His fork hit the plate. The gravy boat trembled. Silence. 6 seconds. Glorious silence. Marlene spoke first. What? Too fast. Too sharp. Gerald lowered his glass. What is she talking about? I stayed seated. Calm. The cash-out refinance recorded August 14th, I said. County records. Public information. Craig stared at the tablecloth. Marlene flushed scarlet. That is private. You made it a family business when Dad gave you $80,000 for a mortgage that was never paid off. Gerald looked from me to Craig to Marlene. Confusion. Then dread. Is this true? He asked Craig. Craig whispered, Marlene. Answer me. Craig swallowed. The store was failing, he said. We used the money to keep it alive. Then refinanced the house. The room froze. Even the children sensed something enormous had broken. Gerald's voice shook. The $80,000 from the trust? Craig nodded. It didn't save the business. Marlene stood abruptly. She's jealous. She always ruins things. Ruth set down her teacup. No, she said quietly. You ruined things when you stole from your sister. Every eye turned to Ruth. She rarely raised her voice because she never needed to. She looked at Gerald. That money was for both girls. You had no right to give it all away. Gerald sat slowly, as if gravity had increased. For the first time in my life, my father had no words. I stood. Not dramatically. Just clearly. I didn't come here to embarrass anyone, I said. I came because I was invited. My voice was steady. I am done being the punchline in a story built on lies. I looked at Marlene. I don't hate you, but I won't protect you anymore. Then at Gerald. You taught everyone here to measure worth by appearances. That's why you missed reality. He flinched. Small, but real. Nolan was already holding my coat. Ruth said, come tomorrow morning. We need to discuss the trust. I nodded. Then Nolan and I left. I didn't slam the door. Slamming is for audiences. I simply closed it. Outside, cold air hit my face like a baptism. In the truck, I placed the unopened envelope on the dashboard. I never had to show the papers. Truth had recognized itself before evidence was required. I cried then. Quietly. Not because I was broken. Because I was free. Nolan drove with one hand and held mine with the other. The next morning, I woke with copper on my chest and sunlight in the room. My phone showed 4 missed calls from Gerald. None from Marlene. 1 text from Ruth. 10 a.m. tea. Bring Nolan. Ruth's kitchen smelled like Earl Grey and fresh biscuits. Gerald was already there. He looked older. Not physically ruined. Just deflated. Like certainty had leaked out overnight. Ruth poured tea for 3. Then said, I've contacted my attorney. Gerald is removed as trustee effective immediately. He opened his mouth. She raised 1 finger. Don't. He closed it. Thea's share will be restored from my personal funds until the trust recovers. I stared at her. Grandma. It was always yours. Then she looked at Gerald. You confused authority with wisdom. Many men do. He looked at me. You could have told me privately. I answered before fear could return. You could have asked privately how I was doing before announcing publicly that I was failing. He absorbed that like a blow. Then nodded once. A tiny nod. But for a man like Gerald, it was seismic. 3 weeks passed. Life did not explode. It rearranged. At work, Diane from the next desk glanced at me and said, So, was it family? I stared. She shrugged. You only go that quiet over blood. Then handed me coffee. No more questions. That was respect. Marlene texted once. I'm sorry you found out that way. Not sorry for lying. Not sorry for taking it. Sorry for the exposure. I did not reply. Craig called. He sounded tired. I wanted to tell the truth last year. I know, I said. How? You never looked me in the eye at brunch. He laughed once, bitterly. Fair. Take care of your kids, Craig. Then I hung up. Some people are villains. Some are weak. Different damage. Gerald called one evening. Long silence first. Then, you're a lot like your grandmother. That had never been praised before. Now it was. He hung up quickly, embarrassed by vulnerability. But I heard what mattered. Nolan finished the second bookshelf that weekend. Copper immediately claimed the top shelf. Naturally. Christmas Eve was at Ruth's house. Not Marlene's colonial. Not Gerald's kingdom. Ruth's tiny kitchen. Table for 4. Ruth. Me. Nolan. And Aunt Doris, who had quietly called after Thanksgiving and said, I should have spoken years ago. I'm speaking now. Ruth roasted a chicken with rosemary and lemon. No crystal. No speeches. No performance. Just warm plates, chipped blue stoneware, laughter that didn't hurt. I made the salad. A very good one. No one used it against me. Ruth had handwritten place cards. Mine was nearest the kitchen. Why here? I asked. She smiled. That's where family sits. Close enough to help. Close enough to be served first. I touched the card with my name on it. Outside, snow fell steadily. Inside, no one was being compared. No one was being measured. No one had to earn permission to belong. Last Thanksgiving, my father raised a glass and called me a failure. This Christmas, my grandmother set a place and called me family. I used to think belonging meant being chosen by people who withheld love. I was wrong. Belonging is choosing where you sit. It is walking away from tables where you are mocked. It is building small, honest lives that glow gold at 4:30 in the afternoon. It is a bookshelf made from reclaimed wood. A cat on the windowsill. A man who stays calm. A grandmother who remembers fairness. And sometimes, it is one quiet question asked at exactly the right moment. That Thanksgiving, I lost a fantasy. But I gained myself. And that was worth more than any house.